to me, it's more important that he's confident, knows how to win, knows how to handle the pressure, and knows how to close the deal than learn that a 15-year-old is better than him. So, that's kind of the tough part with tournaments, I think, is that there's a desire to get ranked when you're 12 years old. And it's like, coaches don't care. Like, you still got another growth spurt to go. They're not really interested in you until you're a freshman. So let's worry about it then.
Hey guys, Vince Drummond here. Just got done recording a new episode of Making the Turn with Matt Walter. Matt is a PGA pro down in Nashville, Tennessee. He actually runs his junior academy and works out of Vanderbilt Legends Club, so he has a lot of great stories. We talk about all things junior golf, whether it comes to tournament preparation or mentally preparing. We also talk a lot about his relationship with a former guest on the show, Dr. Rob Bell. They're doing a lot of cool things right now in a partnership and have a lot of the same tendencies and same thoughts. We also get into some of his teaching style, which he has some very interesting stories and things that he's really working on when it comes to the stuff he's doing with his clients. So really excited to have Matt on the podcast. Enjoyed having him on. Loved being able to sit down and chat with him. Know you guys are going to enjoy it too. Let's get right into the episode. This is Making the Turn, a golf performance podcast. Hats forward, headphones on. Let's go. Welcome back to Making the Turn. I'm your host, Vince Drummond Golf. Really excited today to be joined for the next episode of our podcast with Matt Walter. Thanks for joining us today, Matt.
Thanks for having me on. It's my pleasure.
Of course. Matt is a PGA professional based out of Nashville, Tennessee. Does a lot of work with juniors and is doing a lot of cool things right now when it comes to social media and just growing the game of golf in general. So why don't we just start, Matt, by you just telling us a little bit about you, about your story, kind of how you wound up where you're at and what you're up to these days.
Yeah, man. So, like I said, again, thanks for having me on. It's kind of a funny road that got me to where I was. I grew up kind of all over a little bit, but I spent some time in the South as a young kid under 10, and then my family's from Philly. So about that age, we went back, and that's where I really planted my junior golf roots for myself. Had a great swing coach and a terrible high school coach. So it kind of led me to the path of taking the PGA Golf Management program down at Mississippi State, which was probably one of the best decisions I made at the time, being an 18-year-old. The program down there was really awesome, and my director has really still to this day been very influential and helpful for me as a professional. So that's been huge. Did an internship at a club here in town in 2011 at West Haven Golf Club. They brought me back after I graduated my last semester and started my assistantship as an assistant pro there in 2012. They let me take over kind of a lot of the junior programming and lady programming as far as the club goes. And I just was very fortunate that I was successful at that venture with teaching. And after 2.5 years of teaching golf and being an assistant, my boss was very encouraging and letting me just go full-time teaching. And I was under a teacher by the name of Virgil Herring. He's been on the Golf Channel a few times, and he taught Brent Snedeker for a while and has a lot of top quality players. So I was able to watch him do his thing. And we had a club fitter, Tim Segarich. He's worked at the Faldo Institute for a long time. So I was just kind of like in this perfect blend of, top 100 teacher and a top 100 club fitter. And I was just absorbing as much information from both as I could. And the unfortunate part, they had some management change at the club in 2016. So it forced my hand to leave and went to Vanderbilt Legends Club, where I am now, which has been awesome because we have the Vanderbilt University teams there, the men's and women's team, who are both inside the top 25 in the country right now. The women are on fire at this point, and the guys are doing pretty good too. So standing on the driving range, teaching a bunch of kids with some of the best players in the world at the moment, makes my job a lot easier when I can just tell my kids to turn around and just watch the guys on the other end of the range do their thing. So yeah, a lot of fun there. The junior golf thing's been, very, very, fortunate for me as far as a business model. It's about 60% of my business. And I've had a lot of success with kids getting from that phase of, trying to break that 50 to 45 bubble to going on to winning golf tournaments. I've sent a lot of kids to the U.S. Kids World Championships. I've put kids in college. One of my kids has won the Tennessee State Junior Am. The other one's been ranked number one in the state a couple times. So, just very fortunate that my players work hard and are good regardless of what I say.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's always fun to be able to see the success, and obviously being that close to a school as good as Vanderbilt and teams that are as successful as Vanderbilt is something that's really awesome as well. Talk just a little bit. You mentioned it kind of, but talk a little bit about why you decided to do the PGM program at Mississippi State. What kind of pushed you towards deciding that you wanted to go down the path as a PGA professional?
Yeah, man. For me, it was either, become a PGA pro or probably just beg for change on the street. Um, the desk job just wasn't in the cards for me. I just had a passion to play on TV, right? And so when I was 14, I think it was about 14, I played in my first national event. Actually, it was a qualifier, and it was the first time I was playing a golf course over 7,000 yards, and I shot like 78 or 77, something like that. And I was just thrilled with the number. I thought I played, lights out, and at the time it was. And end of the day of the qualifier, 2 under was in a playoff to get into the tournament, and I was like, whoa, there's a next gear that I'm not aware of. And so, that was, kind of the moment where I decided that, I needed to either step up or look at this game as something for fun. And I made a hard push. I mean, my last 2 years of high school, I was on the borderline of insane. I would get up at 5 a.m., go to the gym before school, get my workout in, do my schooling. And then I was fortunate that my parents let me play golf while there was daylight and then do my homework at the end of the day, provided my grades stayed up, which was always in question. But I spent the last 2 years doing that as hard as I could. And when I said my high school coach wasn't that great, he put in my mind that if you couldn't play for a top tier college school, then you weren't going to make it on TV. And so in my mind, it was, get to the top or find something else. And since I wasn't getting the recruitment from those colleges, I just decided that there has to be something else for me to do. And that's when I found PGA Golf Management. Growing up in Pennsylvania, my dad and my grandfather both went to Penn State, so there was a lot of heavy pressure for that. I still love the blue and white, so don't get me wrong. When I made the decision to go to Mississippi State, it was mostly just because there's a lot of Southern belles and the weather's a lot better. So, it was just an easier sell. I looked at some schools in the Carolinas, and something about Mississippi State just drew me in. And Jeff Ackerson, the director there at the program, he just kind of spoke my language. And no knock on any other schools I looked at or Penn State. I mean, I still wanted to go to Penn State. It was just strictly like the program there was a park and rec degree at Penn State. And I was like, what am I going to do if I don't do golf? Be a gym teacher. So that was just kind of like not an option at that point. And so Mississippi State had a marketing degree, and I said, I can do business. So we went with Mississippi State, and the groundwork that was laid for me there was just second to none. The alumni that have graduated from that program and come back continually to hire interns like myself. I had a great chance to go to TPC Southwind and be an intern for the FedEx St. Jude Classic, where I was on the driving range handing out golf balls to all the tour pros. I mean, Stuart Appleby called me a legend. I thought that was like the biggest thing in my life at the time. I got to caddy for one of the guys in the Pro-Am. So, I mean, I had a lot of fun experiences there. I went to a club back home for my second internship, and that's kind of where the spark to teach kind of came from. They let me start my own junior program there, and I started out with like 2 kids in the clinic, and then by the time I left, I had a 20-kid program going at the time. So I was able to do something right, I guess. And so then when I came to my third internship, the first assistant there, I was in school with for 2 years, and he pretty much came to Mississippi State saying, I'm going to hire you or the other guy, and I'm not looking at anybody else for this position. And I said, all right, well, hire me. And so we had a great talk, and it just kind of worked out. And I was very fortunate to where they let me go down and shadow Virgil as much as I wanted. I probably was down there too much, but he was always had an open door policy for me. And I just, sponged it up the best that I could. And now, was it 7 years now or starting my 7th year now as a professional? It's been a very fun ride. I've had a chance to still play in tournaments from time to time, which is fun. You won't see me on TV, but I still get a little bit of money, so it's good that way. And then I met my wife here in town. She played Division I golf for Belmont, so now I think I'm stuck here because there's no way she's leaving her family.
Awesome. Well, real quick before we kind of move on, one thing that stuck out to me, just being a college coach, and some of our podcast revolves around college recruiting and that kind of stuff. And I know with your clientele, you're working with a high percentage of juniors. Talk just a little bit about that myth, I guess, that you heard in high school, that if you're not going to play big time Division I college golf, then you really shouldn't waste your time. Talk a little bit of just about how that's changed, and maybe some of the advice you give to your juniors now as they're starting to look at that same process.
Yeah, I mean, so it's if I had to tell a kid one thing, it'd be this, and I'm stealing this from Rob Bell and Virgil. It's not when you get there. It doesn't matter when you get there. It's just that you get there, And so there's so many ways now to get to playing on TV, and the guys that are getting to the ranks. I mean, you can look at Brooks Koepka. I mean, he spent a few years over in the European Tour and doing that thing there before he made it to the PGA Tour. And, and him and Dustin Johnson are almost the same age. And, Brooks has just become popular in the last 3 years. So again, it doesn't matter, what it takes, just as long as you get there. So the thing I would encourage kids when they go to recruitment, there's a lot of resources out there. Like I just did a podcast with Brandy Jackson, and she does a lot of recruitment for women's golf. I mean, she'll put you in the right program, and there are Division II, Division III, NAIA schools that could probably beat the bottom of the barrel Division I schools. So, don't think that just because you play Division II that you're not going to have that skill set. I think there's a lot of things to be said for playing all 4 years of college golf too. There are obviously benefits to playing at a top 1 Division I golf school. Don't get me wrong. You're going to play with some of the best players in the country. But at the same time, just because they developed by the time they're 19, 20 years old and you haven't done that yet, that doesn't mean you can't get there. I mean, the brain doesn't fully develop its frontal cortex until you're 25. So, you're still developing the synapse that send the pulses from your brain to your muscles to produce, quality shots and quality shots under pressure. So at the end of the day, the most important thing is to find a school that, is a distance that you're comfortable with from home, with a major that you want to study, and then can you afford it? Because golly, I can't even imagine some of these schools nowadays. And so that's why I went to Mississippi State, man. It was cheap, but and then from there you start to look at the program. Do you like the team, and do you like the coach and the schedule they have? I mean, the thing you have to remember is, the coach may not always be there. You might show up, and then the next year coach gets an offer to go somewhere else, and you still have to be at that school for 3 or more years. So, it's really important to do all your homework before you start to look at coach and team, in my opinion, because that's what's really going to be more important, because teammates can transfer, coaches can transfer. You might even change divisions. I mean, that's happened to my wife. I mean, she was in, I forget what it was before, but now they're OVC. And so they could completely change who they played against in their schedule. So there's a lot of variables to the college golf thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think for me, being somebody who played at an NAIA school, coached at some NAIA schools, you can definitely see that the talent level is there. The top players, especially for me, talking at the NAIA level, are still players that go out and consistently shoot under par, average in the 60s. They're great players. And so I think it's just something for everybody to kind of keep in mind, that just because you may not get to the dream school that you've always dreamed about as a kid doesn't mean that you're not going to find the right spot and still be able to flourish and be very successful.
Absolutely. And the thing and the myth behind the fact that just because you're a girl golfer is going to mean you're going to get guaranteed a scholarship is just absolute trash. I mean, I'm telling you right now, the girls that play on Vanderbilt's team will absolutely beat the brains out of most people that I look at hitting the golf ball. There's still that level of competition that you have to be able to get to if you want to compete at those stages. And, most of these schools that aren't your Division I, if you will, you're still having to be a plus handicap if you want to qualify. You can't be a slouch. And I think that's where, if I was telling a kid that wants to play college golf, if your handicap's 0, that's a pretty good place to start. I hope you have a great personality and the coach likes you. You know, 'cause that's going to be and you got good grades. 'Cause if you got good grades, the coach will pick you up because you don't have to put as much money on you from the scholarship side, from the athletic side. So, you know, don't forget about your grading, you know.
Definitely. So speaking a little bit more to your junior golf and some of the stuff that you're doing, talk a little bit about Matt Walter Golf Academy, kind of what you've got set up there, what that kind of looks like, what that really is.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, my brand is, you know, my teaching business. And I've been very blessed to have a good core group of clients and friends that take lessons and work hard. So for me, a lot of what I lay out for my students is, you know, a lot of self accountability. You know, that's kind of the big thing for me is, you know, I'm not going to hold your hand and do it for you. I'm going to be your Sherpa, but at the end of the day, you still got to climb the mountain, right? And I'm just here to show you the path. And so a lot of what I do, you know, specifically for kids is I lay out a lot monthly programs from which we're about to start next month in April and run those from April to the end of the high school season, where we have pod training, group training, we have playing lessons, private lessons. You know, we're talking about the mental side of the game. We're looking at course management strategies. We talk recruitment. I mean, it's very a holistic approach. I decided a couple years ago to get away from the one-off lesson. If a kid wants to play college golf and they come to see me, they're going to go put the work in, whether they come do it in the holistic kind of monthly program or if they come see me on their own, they're going to put the time in either way. The reason I went to that monthly route was because there's a fringe group of kids that dabble on the edge of, I like the sport, I don't know how much yet. And then some of them have talent, but they don't know what it actually takes to get there. And I would have these lessons where I'd see this kid, I see little Johnny, you know, once every other week, and he'd only practice a couple of times. And it's just like, this kid could be good if he just did the time. And so when I switched to the monthly program, it became more cost effective for the parent. And it also got me in front of the kids by about almost tenfold, where, you know, they can only afford 2 lessons a month. Now they're seeing me for about 13 hours a month or 11 hours a month and in various ways. And it's just a lot more beneficial to everybody. So that's kind of where the junior stuff goes through. And then I do a winter program from December through March. And it's a lot more focused on strength and conditioning and mechanic stuff where we can tear apart your swing, kind of build it back up if we have to, or focus on different aspects of your game. If you already got a solid swing that, you know, maybe it's more performance-based training. So a lot of good aspects there. And then as far as like, you know, how I teach, as far as if I got a new student in, I have been very fortunate to be around a lot of great instructors, and Mike Adams and E.A. Tischler have a system called BioSwing Dynamics. And what led me to that system was that I kept getting players that, you know, maybe weren't as athletic, weren't as flexible, didn't have the golf IQ, if you will, to get the club around them in an efficient manner. And for some reason, the things I was saying wasn't working as well as it should have worked. I'm like, I know this information is correct. Why are they not able to do it? And I found that there's a lot of structural things about the body that have an influence to how we swing the golf club. And I went and had a chance to interact with EA and another guy in there by the name of Jeff Smith, who's like their right-hand man. And the information they were pouring out to me, I was just like, this makes sense. This is the first thing that makes sense. And I took the few nuggets I got from them, I took it back, tried it out, and I was like, I need to know more. So I dabbled into it a little bit more. It became a level 1 certified coach, going to get my level 2 done here probably next month. And I mean, it's just seen huge changes. I've worked with players that play for money. I've worked with college kids, and simple things like changing their hand location on the club. I work with one of the, from time to time, the other coach I teach with, he'll pester me to help him every once in a while. I just moved his hand on his club one day and he got 6 miles an hour faster. So, you know, just like simple changes like that can produce big results. I had a kid come in who just got recruited to play for a school in north of Nashville. who's at 104 miles an hour, who's lost all his speed. And, I didn't work with him regularly. I've never worked with him regularly. This was just like a 2-time tune-up. And in the first lesson, in the first 20 minutes, I had him going at 115, hitting 300-yard bombs, and he's just sitting there going, this is insane. I'm like, this is how you're built, like this is how it's supposed to work. And the fun part for me is when you take somebody who's played the game for a while, maybe has that knowledge and has that experience, but doesn't, gotten lost along the way maybe, right? And then I get the phone call. I don't know what I'm doing. I've tried everything. Can you help me out? Sure, man, no problem. And I throw them a nugget, and like anybody that's ever played a little bit, when they've hit the ball well, a lot of times they've done some of this stuff, but they've been coached out of it because it's not, quote unquote, what you're supposed to do, right? Not looking like Tiger Woods, so you're not doing it right. And as soon as they go back to that, they start hitting the ball straighter and higher and farther, and they look at me and go, oh, yeah, that's what it used to be like. And I'm like, yeah, that was me about 3 years ago. Join the club. So it's, it's been very fun for me in that regard. And, I just think if you can get a player to the top of the backswing that allows them to have an easy transition where they can apply the most effective force into the ball with the least amount of effort, the game becomes a lot more fun.
Definitely. And so speaking kind of just on that same regard, piggybacking off that a little bit, but obviously with you working with a lot of juniors and with everybody talking now, seeing the guys out there who are hitting it as far as they are, one of the things you hear a lot is when you're a junior, just hit it as far as you can. You can figure out how to hit it straight later. Talk a little bit about what you're doing with your juniors to help them build speed, and then whether you think that little saying, I guess, is true, or whether you approach it a little bit differently.
I've become known as a guy that wants your kid to hit it far. I love violence of action in the golf dojo. So I'll tell you this, a college coach, and you know this too from in your experience, a college coach will take the kid that can hit it 30 yards by everybody else and tell them how to play the golf course to suit it before the kid that hits it 30 yards behind everybody else. At that age, it's so much harder to make up that difference in speed that you're going to get passed over if you don't have the speed. The tour right now is moving in a direction that is insanely fast. You already have 2 players that can clock it over 130. The web.com is faster than the PGA Tour on average, and the colleges are faster than the web. So it's not getting slower. So I'll say that. And all credit to the technology, man, and the coaches out there that are doing the research, that have the time to understand the body and understand what ground reaction forces can be applied to affect the golf swing. It's huge. And so what I do with a lot of my kids is, super speed golf has been a big implement into what I use for my players. I've seen it. I mean, I have a kid that I've been working with for 2 years who went from 80 miles an hour to over 100 now. And he's 13, clocking 103. Yeah, I didn't get that to like high school, college. So, but so again, it's not that speed's everything, but at the same time, I have always believed I would much rather you do it as fast as you can, find the center of the face, and then we'll figure out how to hit it straight. Because I think personally, getting the club to go fast and getting the club on the ball are the 2 hardest things that you can do in the golf swing. And then learning how to curve it is the easiest thing to do in the golf swing, in my opinion. But maybe I'm different. I don't know. But so what I tell a lot of my kids is there's the right time to learn how to develop speed. So when a kid's in a growth spurt, that is the best time to go fast. It is the worst time to learn motor skills. The kids their arms are growing at a different length and they're shooting up in height. They might be getting taller before their arms grow out. It's not a symmetrical growth when they start hitting that first growth spurt. And they are so lost because they're also getting this huge pump of hormones that they've never experienced in their life. And so it's just a big concoction or cocktail of just not a good situation to learn motor skills. Now, you're going to have to do some a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's the time to go fast. Once they break that growth spurt, hit them again with the mechanics and bring back those motor skills because now their body's different. Things have changed. They're structurally different. We have to reevaluate how they're built to build the golf swing back so that they can be effective again at the ball. So there's definitely a juggling act there. And I sat in a seminar with Dr. Scott Lynn from Swing Catalyst, and or maybe it was Ben Shears, but they were kind of doing something together. But they said it the best: when we're young, we're like a fine cut of filet mignon. As we get older, we become jerky. So you only have a certain window to tape the muscles as they're built to become fast. And if you miss that window, you can't increase your peak. So when we're young, we don't know what our peak is. We know where we're at, but we don't know how high up it can go. I mean, Cameron Champ's at 130. You asked the guys 5 years ago if you think somebody could be at 530. I bet you a lot, or 130. I bet you a lot of guys would say, no way, right? And then you got Dustin Johnson out there at 122 in a heartbeat. So it's going fast. But then as we get older, for the older golfers out there, it's not so much about increasing the peak. It's about maintaining the peak, like staying at that top level. Don't fall down the mountain. Keep pushing yourself so that you stay up there and you're maximizing what you have in the tank. And I think that's where, as you grow older, you can maintain that level. And when we see the speed bumps in a lot of the older players, it's just because they had a peak a lot higher than what they thought they did. And they were just kind of hanging out at 100 miles an hour. And then next, I get them to 110 and they're like, oh, this is amazing. I'm like, yeah, you had it in you the whole time.
Yeah, that's awesome. So going off of that, obviously we're talking speed, we're talking those type of things, but when you look at junior golfers, when you look at the golfers in your academy, are there certain things, certain foundations that you're trying to help them build to help them be more successful in the future, to help them get to college? Are there certain, like a checklist maybe, or some sort of foundation that you're really looking at, like, okay, I think a kid needs this, this, and this in order to be able to be prepared for that next level?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a specific question for a broad answer I'm about to give you. But at the end of the day, if you're trying to get better, right, it's about setting achievable benchmarks or achievable goals. There's a large swath of people that if you set a challenge too difficult, they'll quit. If the challenge is too easy, you set up a false confidence that makes them think they're better than they are. And then when they get really tested, they fail, and then they lose their confidence altogether. So as a coach, the hardest thing we face is how do we set a goal that's marginally harder than our player's skill set so that it doesn't make them quit, but it pushes them to be better. And that's what I'm constantly trying to do in the Bay. I'm constantly trying to give a player a challenge that's just past what I know they can do so that it pushes them to want to get better. And if it goes too hard, we have to know when to throttle it back. And so you're constantly playing that juggling act. And, as far as getting the kids to the college level, that's kind of goes back to the kid and what they want. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't make somebody want something they don't want. And it goes back to you can't take a horse, you can take the horse to the watering hole, but you can't make it drink the water, right? I can give you the water, I can give you the whole dang lake. And if you're not thirsty, there's nothing we can do about it. So finding a way to motivate the kid to want to do that isn't necessarily my job. My job is if the kid's motivated and wants it, to get them there. And, I've found a lot of times kids don't always want to go play college golf. They just want to play for the high school team. They don't want to embarrass themselves playing on a high school team. They want to have fun. They want to enjoy making contact. And you won't believe it when I say this, but I literally ask players questions of, do you want to hit it better or do you want to shoot lower scores? Because those are two different conversations we have to have. And if you're just here to hit the ball better, all right, well, we'll just stand here until you hit the ball better. But if you want to shoot a lower score, we have to look at so much more than how you just hit a golf ball, because at the end of the day, that's not the hardest part of playing the game. I mean, once you get to a really good skill set, hitting the ball is not the hardest part. So, there's a constant juggling act in the conversations, and, finding the right tours. There's I don't know what some parents think when they want to put their 12-year-old playing against 15-year-olds. I just don't understand that concept. It really just befuddles me when parents come in and say that. And I'm like, I get it. Either your kid can hit at 250 at 12 years old. That's great. He's going to get his face throttled in against his 15-year-old. All right. That's not what his ego needs. His ego needs to learn how to win golf tournaments, make a bunch of birdies, and be comfortable in that atmosphere. Now, to that defense, if you're putting them in fields that are super weak, you're going back to that false confidence narrative where if the other kids are 10 shots behind them, all right, let's talk about maybe moving them up a division, right? But there's a time and a place for all of it. If you move them up too far ahead and then now he can't break 80, he can't top 10 an event, that's not doing him any good. He might be learning a couple things the older kids are doing, but to me, it's more important that he's confident, knows how to win, knows how to handle the pressure, and knows how to close the deal than learn that a 15-year-old is better than him. So, that's kind of the tough part with tournaments, I think, is that there's a desire to get ranked when you're 12 years old. And it's like, coaches don't care. Like, you still got another growth spurt to go. They're not really interested in you until you're a freshman. So let's worry about it then.
For sure. So speaking of tournaments, looking at that from kind of that junior perspective, when you work with your students, as you have somebody who's getting prepared for an event, say maybe the week leading up, or obviously in the summer for some kids, they come in on a Wednesday and they had a tournament on Monday and they have another tournament on Friday. But what does that look like in a tournament prep situation as compared to maybe just like a normal practice day or a time when they're not quite as busy?
Yeah. So, the schedule is the biggest thing, right? We have to look at our schedule as what are our majors? One. So are you trying to qualify for the US AM, US Junior AM, State Open, US Open? Like, what are you trying to play in? And where do you consider your major? That's the first thing I ask them, because we don't need to play an event the week before we play our biggest event of the year. Like, that's just poor planning, in my opinion. And if a parent sets that up, I almost want to slap them. But we have to look at a schedule so that it's effective, so that we're peaking at the right time. And, it's funny because a lot of parents and kids will come in and tell me everything they did wrong the week before the last tournament and completely forget that we're trying to prepare for an event ahead of us. And so there has to be a juggling act of, like, yes, I understand your putter was not as hot as you think it is, but let me ask you this question. If you had to get up and down 12 times, how many of those got inside of 3 feet? None. Well, it's really not your putter's fault that you're hitting it to 12 feet and you couldn't make a putt, right? It's really your wedge's fault at that point. And why were you missing so many greens to begin with? So the conversation has to be identifying what went wrong the week before, but preparing for the week ahead. So if the course is like, here's a great example. I have kids that played an event last weekend who are now going to play an event in 2 weeks. And the event this past weekend played 6,800 yards almost. And the event, this next one coming up, is playing 6,000 yards. We can't prepare the same way for that event at 6,800 versus the one that's at 6,000. Like, that's dumb. You're not going to hit the same shots. You're not going to be hitting 3-woods into par 4s. You're going to be hitting wedges. So we're spending all this time focusing on these 4-irons and 3-woods that we just hit poorly last week, and then walk into the event having all these wedges in our hands. We didn't prepare effectively. So there's a lot of those kind of conversations, trying to set up a schedule. And I think for a lot of players is, again, just identifying your majors first and then going from there and getting yourself prepped. And then as far as tournament prep goes, the earlier you can play a golf course, the better, right? If you're playing it the day before, in my opinion, that's like, I get it from a travel expense, but if you can get to that golf course within your means 2 weeks or 3 weeks before, that's huge, because now you can do the right amount of prep for the golf course. But if you roll into a golf course you've never played and the first time you're seeing it within 24 hours of the tournament, I hope you have a great game. That's all I could tell you, and you're adaptable. So, doing an effective course strategy where I'm just now starting to get my feet wet with this decade system with Scott Fawcett. And I think a lot of the stuff he has is really, really good. And, it's really just a matter of preparing the golf course to your shot pattern. You're not a sniper. You're a shotgunner. You're going to have a ballistic grouping that's not going to be perfect. And you have to be able to dope your scope left or right, depending on how you hit the ball. And then you just have to look at the golf course, and we have this awesome thing called Google Maps. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but you can look at it and go, here's a corridor in which I can hit my driver. I can aim at this tree and have a straight line into the flag if I hit on this angle. And if it goes left or right, I'm still in play. And I think that's part of course prep now, that between the yardage books, Google Maps, and TrackMan getting your dispersion patterns, there's no reason why you can't be prepared for an event.
Awesome. I want to get into some of the other stuff that you're doing outside of just your teaching. Obviously, the way we got linked up is through a guest who's already been on the podcast, Dr. Rob Bell. I know you guys just completed a workshop down there in Nashville a couple of weeks ago. So just talk a little bit about that, kind of what you guys had set up and what you guys went through with that workshop.
Yeah, I mean, look, Doc is awesome. I love Dr. Rob Bell. He's got such a great personality, and he brings in a wealth of knowledge and experience. The workshop came about because he came on my podcast and did a episode with me and invited me to become a part of this group that he's starting up called Always Play On. So Always Play On is hitting the trifecta of communication between the junior golfer or junior athlete, really is for any sport, their parent and their coach, right? So you got all three, the athlete, parent, and coach. And when he was telling me about it, I was like, send me the details. This sounds awesome. I went through the course, and it is everything I hoped it would be. And it just provides such a great knowledge and of nuggets of information for everybody, so that everybody can communicate more effectively. And so to get that thing rolling, I looked at him and said, hey, let's do this thing right. Why don't we have you come down to my club, and I'll get the kids and the parents to show up, and let's do a workshop. And we had 80 signed up. I think just north of 70 actually showed up. We had a couple cancels at the end, but either way, we had over 70 people in the house, and Rob just hit a home run, which was to be expected. But, I've never had more parents send me back feedback where parents were saying that was the best $100 I've ever spent on anything golf related ever. I can't believe all the dumb things I say in the car ride home. I didn't realize how different what I wanted and my son wanted from this. I mean, it just went on and on and on. And the thing that I took away the most from myself personally as a coach was, it doesn't matter what you say, it matters what they hear. And it's just so interesting to me, because there's so many times in a lesson where I've always made it a point that at the end of the lesson to have the players tell me what they're going to go practice. I didn't realize I was already doing that to an extent, but still at that point, there's still things that you say in the lesson that you have to sit there and go, did they really pick up on that? Did they really take away what I just said, or are they going to manipulate it in some facet? And so I've now become a little more quizzical in my lessons which I already was, but now I'm worse, as far as making sure they understand the material. And again, as a parent, and how that applies as a parent is, Rob had a really great exercise. We'll just use the exercise as an example, where everybody took a piece of paper and they had to close their eyes, and he gave the entire room of parents the same instructions, and they had to tear a piece here, tear a piece there. It was about 8 steps. By the time everybody opened their eyes and unfolded the piece of paper, everybody had a different piece of Swiss cheese. And, and Rob's like, well, I told you to do the same thing. Why is your paper different than your paper? And like about 35 light bulbs just went off with all these parents of like, holy crap, I can't believe how messed up I am. And trying to figure out like all the things that they've been trying to tell their kid, and that they're just not getting it because there's just a communication flaw. And so Rob really brought it in and had a lot of other great nuggets for the workshop. We'll definitely be doing another one. It was awesome.
Awesome. That's so cool. And it's cool too, the things that kind of come about from podcasting and being able to do this. So why don't you just talk a little bit about your podcast, about Junior Golf Blueprint, just kind of some of the things you're doing with it, what listeners can expect to hear if they tune in for a couple episodes.
Yeah. So Junior Golf Blueprint has been up for about a year. We're dropping the 73rd episode on Friday. The podcast came about because one of my clients came up to me, and his health kind of comes and goes a little bit, but he's got a 13-year-old son now, and he made the statement to me is like, if I ever kick the bucket, I really don't know if my wife knows what to do with my kid, and I really just want him to keep playing this game. And he's like, I just don't know where she would turn. And I said, I can fix that. This seems like a great idea for a podcast. All right. And so I've been very fortunate that I spent about just over 2 years on the radio with Virgil on Saturday mornings, and had like I said, about 2 years of experience doing live radio for an hour. I learned how to interview. I learned how to talk, when you can't like cut it. And so it just kind of became, easy for me. And as you can tell now, I don't have any problem talking to a wall. But the podcast became really cool for me because as it gained traction, it gained interest from other coaches, right? And coaches would want to be on the podcast. Parents, I haven't had a parent on, but they've expressed interest. I'm thinking about doing a panel, but I've had kids on, talking about, having a 14-year-old girl who's one of the top players in the country come on and talk about her experience playing the U.S. Women's Am was unreal. And the insight that a 14-year-old girl has that's already better than mine was just super awesome. Right. And so you dive into the mindset of some of these kids and have them on. It's really unique. And the other cool part for me was having all these coaches come in and talk about the things that they're doing, the programs that they're running, how they're doing it, and finding, there's a chunk of information that everybody's doing the same. And then there's like a chunk that some of these coaches are doing that like, man, that guy's got something figured out. I need to tap into that. And there's some information where like, yeah, maybe that could kind of work. I guess I could see that. And so you start to like weigh out this whole plethora of knowledge, and you're just sitting there just sifting through it. And for me as a coach, I'm kind of sitting back going, this is great. I have all these top coaches coming in here and talking to me about what they're doing. I'm just getting smarter for it. My listeners are having a great time listening to it, and it's been great. And one of the funnier stories behind the whole podcast was Maurice Allen, the long drive champ from last year. He said something about donating back to the high school and, in support of his school where he grew up. And I was like, man, this guy seems like he kind of be in the junior golf scene. So for whatever reason, I think I had one too many glasses of wine. I tagged him in a post on my story on Instagram, and I said, hey, congrats, champ. This dude responded to every person who sent him a message, period. I happen to be one of them. So I'm sitting on the couch watching a movie with my wife at 11 o'clock at night on a Friday night. And I get this message from Maurice Allen. I'm like, holy crap. I'm like, are you seeing this? So I was like, hey man, that's awesome. By the way, I got this junior golf podcast. It's called Junior Golf Blueprint. Would you come on, talk about, your story and talk about what it's like competing at a World Long Drive Championship? And he goes back, yeah, what do you need? I'm like, this is going to happen. I'm like, here's my cell phone. Text me. He texts me. I'm like, I'm blowing my brain out. I'm up. It's like 1 a.m. I'm never up at 1 a.m. I got 2 kids under 2. I don't stay up that late because I don't sleep. And we're going back and forth. And so next thing you know, he comes on the podcast 2 days later, and we record this hour episode. And I didn't realize that he has a speaking kind of engagements that he does. And the dude just laid down so much good info. It was unbelievable. And he was just a solid guy, right? And so, like, if it wasn't for the podcast, there's no chance I'd ever had a chance to interact with Maurice Allen like that, right? And so it was just unreal. And the podcast has been taken off, and it's just been a lot of fun.
That's awesome. That's super cool. Definitely we'll put the link to that down in the description box below. Want people to go over and check it out. There's a lot of good stuff on there. Talk a little bit about just maybe it was the Maurice Allen story, but whether it's podcasting or teaching or whatever, just one of your favorite stories, one of the cool things that's happened to you just as a result of being a PGA pro, being in the work that you do and the things that you've been able to be a part of.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's look, every day is a blessing for me because I get a chance to interact with so many different personalities and so many different people. To pick one story would be almost impossible. Obviously the Maurice Allen thing with the podcast was really cool, but the impact you leave with some of these kids when you're teaching junior golfers, you don't really realize how much you mean to some of them in different situations. And so for me, it's been every parent that has sent me an email, text message, phone call that has said, you may not know this, but the way you treat my son or daughter every time they come to see you makes them go home so much happier, feel so much better about themselves, and I can really see a difference in them because of you. And dude, it's hard to sit here and not have the tears run down your cheek when you read that stuff, because you just sit back and you're like, man, I just thought I was teaching golf. And when you realize that as a coach, the impact you leave has to be bigger than the impact you have at the golf ball. And you just have this opportunity to take a kid who, his parents might be getting a divorce and you're not really aware of that. And they come in and they're beaten up, and not necessarily physically, but just beaten up mentally. And you just tell they're down and you're like, hey man, what's going on? And they kind of open up to you, and you're just sitting back and you hear this stuff that's going on at home. And you just sit back and go, I don't know what this kid would do if he didn't have this golf lesson right now. Like, who knows what trouble he'd be getting into? Who knows what he'd be doing? But he's here with me, so I'm going to make this important. And, I make it a point that every player I teach, they have my phone number, my personal cell. It's a 24/7 line. I've sometimes not the fastest response because of 2 kids, but at the same time, I always answer my players. And you just don't know what kind of impact you're going to have. So to pick a story would be tough, but to tell you that over a very short career that I've had compared to others, the letters, the emails, the phone calls, the text messages that I get makes it worth every penny that I've put back into this game and every bit of effort. So, I mean, that's really what it comes back on.
That's awesome, man. That's powerful stuff, and that's really cool. I want to get into a part of the show now that we like to do for a little bit of fun. We like to call it the Twilight Nine. So we compare it to playing 9 holes as quick as you can while the sun goes down in the summer. Gonna do 9 questions, rapid fire, and so whatever just kind of pops in your head, spit it back at me. Sound good?
Let's roll.
Awesome. Go-to pre-round meal?
Oh, spaghetti.
Favorite on-course snack?
That's tough. I love the trail mix, and the guilty pleasure is goldfish.
Nice. What's the favorite golf course you've ever played?
Oh, it's tough. Golly. All right, I'm going to do 2 just because I had the opportunity to play St. Andrews 1 month before the British Open. That was probably like the coolest experience I've ever had across the pond or out of the States. And then I've also had a chance to play this place called the Golf Club up in Dublin, Ohio, where it was 125 members. The rules are you're not allowed to see another group while you're on the golf course, and it was just an insane experience.
Awesome. What's the best golf tournament to watch on TV?
Masters.
What is your golf brand of choice?
TaylorMade.
What's your current pump-up song?
Oh, that's good. I float around on it, man. But I'll tell you this: I always go back to Eminem.
Nice.
And lose yourself. You just can't beat it. You get one shot.
Nice. What is the hardest exercise to do in the gym?
The treadmill.
What's the best movie of all time?
Oh man. I can't do this rapid fire. Man, I tell you, that's tough. All right, best movie of all time, Deadpool.
Nice. And your favorite sports team?
That's tough. I grew up a Flyers fan as a kid. Living here in Nashville, become slightly more of a Predators fan. So I would probably lean more towards the Preds at this point.
Nice. That's our Twilight Nine, a segment we like to do just to have a little bit of fun and to help the listener get to know you a little bit better. Real quick, before we let you go, just want to kind of bring home a couple of points from the podcast. We've talked a lot about juniors. We've talked a lot about their parents and that relationship. For those juniors, for those parents who are trying to kind of get their kid to that next level or working on improving in golf, what would your piece of advice be to them, whether it's directly to the junior, to their parent, or to both of them? What would be something that you would kind of make sure they understand?
Well, I'll split it into 2 pieces because it really kind of has to be, in my opinion. So for the parent, make sure your kid knows that you love them. At the end of the day, your kid doesn't want to fail. And believe me, they are well aware when they hit a terrible golf shot. You don't have to remind them. And so my key to a parent is stay out of the way, love them unconditionally, and support whatever the coach is telling them to do. And if you can do those 3 things, the relationship you have with your kid will be a lot more fun. And the tension goes away, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to the bad days. Because at the end of the day, if your kid walks away from the golf course, whether they won or DFL'd, if they know that you love them, it doesn't matter. And that's what the most important thing is as a parent. For the junior golfer, if you think you've practiced enough, you're not even close. So, at the end of the day, for the kids out there, this sport requires so much time, dedication, and commitment to details that you have to really look back and go, did I do everything that I could to get better today? Did I do everything I could to get better this week, this month, whatever it is? Because I promise you this, the time you took away from the sport, the time you took off, somebody else capitalized on that window. And there's always somebody else taking advantage of every minute of every day that you're not doing it. So when it comes back to the time and questions that I get of how much should I practice or how much do you want me to practice, my question back to them is, if you're asking me that question, you don't have any idea what it takes. Because the question is not how much I want you to practice. The question is, how much do you want it? And that will answer the question for yourself.
Awesome. Those are two great pieces of advice. One last question before we let you go. Just finish this sentence for me. The best part of my job is?
The impact I leave on everybody else.
Awesome. Appreciate you coming on, man. Real quick before we have you go, just let everybody know where they can follow you, where they can keep up to date with you on social media and all the things you're up to and taking part in.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks again for having me on. The social media, you can find me at Matt Walter PGA. That'll get you on every platform. The website's mattwaltergolf.com. It's currently being redone, so if there's a little bit of glitch, I'm sorry about that. And then, if they want to find me on an email, they can email me, mattwaltergolf@gmail.com.
Awesome. Thanks again so much, man. I really appreciate it. It was awesome to have you on.
Yeah, man, it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
That wraps up this week's episode of Making the Turn. I want to give a huge shout out to Matt Walter for coming on the podcast. As you guys can tell, he cares a lot more about his students than he does his golf swing or their golf game. He really is teaching to make an impact. You can tell that by the things he's doing through his podcast and through his other ventures. I want to encourage you guys to follow along with him on social media. He has some great content on there. Also, be sure that you tune into the Junior Golf Blueprint podcast. I have a lot of really great things that he's teaching on there, a lot of great things that he's working to do in order to help you have a better and more successful junior golf career. Once again, I want to thank you guys for stopping by. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Really enjoying making the turn and being able to continue to churn out episodes for you guys. Always grateful for the comments and for the feedback. So really look forward to just seeing you guys again next week. Make sure you're staying up to date with everything that we're doing by signing up to our email subscription list, which you can find at vincedraumangolf.com. Thank you guys so much. I'm Vince Draumangolf. This is Making the Turn, and I'm out of here.